Welcome to Sustainable Industry, the resource for net zero leadership. Every episode, we're joined by a different business leader and pioneer, sharing practical insights into the ways they're driving out carbon from their production. Delighted to be hosting Owen, Supply Chain Director from PepsiCo today, as we talk electrification. Ian's running a fantastic project in Turkey to take one of their sites off grid, and where they can't electrify, some of the novel technologies they're employing to bridge those gaps. Welcome, Ian.
Thanks very much. Nice to be with you, Nick.
Thank you. Well, as I say, we've got an exclusive insight into a project that you're running over there in Turkey with the aim to take an entire site off grid. And as I say, some of the gaps there in terms of where you can't use electrification, some of the technologies that you're using to bridge those gaps. So Ian, over to you. Do you want to give us a quick overview of the project and where you are?
Yeah, sure. I think it's pretty worthwhile just setting a bit of the wider context to what we're doing in PepsiCo first. So a couple of years ago, 2021, our CEO published and launched something called PepsiCo Positive, which is around driving the sustainability agenda. And by 2030, every factory in all parts of our business have got to reduce greenhouse gases by 40%. And then by 2040, we've made the commitment to be totally net zero. So the part of this, for the project that I'm working on in Turkey is around how we sort of complement and work towards those strategic aims. And one of the things we've been doing is how do we, in order to get the emissions down, you need to find novel ways to power your facilities. So there's double sort of pronged attack of what you need to do. First of all, how efficient can you be? The best thing to do is not use the energy in the first place. First thing is, how do we design lines? How do we leverage gravity? But there is a point where you do still need some fundamental fuel source. And as you alluded to, we have electricity in our factories, and the primary source of energy is gas. Now, PepsiCo is a multi-billion organization. Everybody always thinks they can. But the other aspect that we do are crisps and snacks, such as Doritos, Frito-Lay, or in the UK, Walker's crisps. So that's predominantly where, heavy pieces of our gas usage. But one of the things we set about, again, as you talked about in our western part of Turkey, and a factory called Izmir, is around, how can we get it off the grid? This is a beverage factory. It's predominantly a lot of energy, electric usage, but fortunately a lot of sun. So naturally, the first piece of technology that we can use is solar. Over the years, solar has become more efficient. I don't know if people know, but the actual conversion rate of solar is still relatively low. You'd probably get 6-7% efficiency out of a panel. A couple of years ago, it was 4 or 5. So the technology is moving along. But the challenge also been is the financial aspect. How do you make a financial, business case in order to drive this? Now, there's extremely few things which have come out of some of the crisis over the years. But actually, the rising energy costs over the last 12 to 18 months has actually, in one way, made business cases a lot more stronger for all organizations when they look at if you can take things and convert it to solar or other technologies, they're actually starting to pay back on a significant time, reduced time than it did in the past. So what I did, I'm responsible for the supply chain of Turkey, and what I set about late last year was around how do we take factory off the grid. Now, one of the things here is when you're looking at solar is actual physical amount of. So to just give you a bit of context, Nick, to how many panels we have. We currently have around 15,000 panels in our supply chain of Turkey, and that powers about a third of the power we need. So what are the challenges? First and foremost is where to put all these panels. How do I get the space? You can put them on factory roofs, you can make car parks. So what the first thing we need to do is identify which of our factories is best suited, one with the maximum sunlight, but secondly, we have the land around in order to position these panels in our own ground, so we don't need to rent or purchase anymore. And our aspiration now is subject to approval and all the standard caveats. But what we're aiming to do there is take that factory completely off the electrical grid by 2025, and that's through a phased installation of solar panels. And this is going to be the key test. Now, there is a bit of another caveat to this. Solar panels are very efficient through the day. They're not efficient through the night. So what we are working there is with the local government organisation about, we give a surplus through the day, and technically we bring it back off the grid in the night. So just to be totally clear on that aspect, is sort of what we will do is we'll generate through the day the total 24 hours worth of consumption, and then obviously the standard distribution electrical companies will do the rest around bringing that back into the factory. So as a top level, that is the plan, and we're going to be doing that this year and 24 into 25, a 3-year plan in order to put full extent of solar technology onto that factory and see whether we can actually achieve it. I'm sure there will be challenges along the way, but we're certainly up for those challenges.
Brilliant. Just a quick question. When you say that the solar doesn't work at night, and you collaborated with the government to sort of give them more energy during the day, are there not solutions to store that energy on site?
There are, and I'm not just passionate about doing it in business. I'm very passionate about doing this at home. Hopefully, when I get my heat pump in a couple of months, I'll be totally off the grid as well. And the answer is batteries. The challenge is when you're in a house, you can get 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 kilowatt of batteries, no problem. When you get that into a large factory facility, the levels amount of batteries you need to load balance that is significant. Yeah, we're talking megawatts of power consumption. So, albeit you can do it, at the moment, I suggest we're not building to that level of scale. Now, there are electrical companies out there starting to do it. I'm sure people like Mr. Musk will be exploring it in his place. But at the moment, really, and I think this is somewhere where, albeit I work in Turkey, I live in the UK. I think this is where I hope that electrical companies start thinking about this. How do we actually solve? Because this is the big bit. Is how do we if we can generate all this? How do we store it? It's the same for wind. Yeah, it's great. But if you got a dark day with no wind, as we see in the UK now, we have fundamental problems with our energy supplies. We have to try and import it from nuclear from France. So we do need to find greater degrees of storage. Yes, there's batteries. There's also large capacitors, I think, out there. But at the moment, from a cost viability, it's just not there for a return at the moment. So this is where we try and look with, the electrical companies and large organisations to come to some agreement on that.
And moving on to how you're monitoring the progress of the project, and indeed the reduction in the amount of carbon. What sort of strategies are you employing to monitor the continuous improvement of the emissions from that site?
So there's the standard calculations when you look at the emissions and stuff. So the standard calculations. I'd like to stay here. We've got a big sophisticated control tower looking at this, but ultimately it's very simple. Yeah, we have a very small team managing our utilities, and from a day-to-day tactical, they are managing and running that facility and doing that aspect. And then from a strategic point of view, we just have standard reviews. So as many leaders do. I work along with my peers within Turkey and also my colleagues in supply chain is about what is our strategic goals. So as I already alluded to prior in the podcast, by 2030, we've got to reduce those emissions by 40%. 2030 sounds a long time away, but as we all know, the older we get, the years go faster. Naturally, that's just over 6 years to reduce 40% of greenhouse gases. That's a big challenge. So strategically, we lay out a roadmap, and then from that, we then worked out what is the most efficient way in order to go and execute that. So there's nothing like sophisticated technology out there at the moment that we're using. Or can I say that there is plenty out there? I've not yet seen one which is worth investing in. I've seen nothing that we don't already do at the moment in a very simplistic way.
As you say, ambitious targets and time waits for no one. Can you walk us through some of the KPIs that you're using to make sure that you stay on track and make sure that this is a future-proof project as much as possible?
So KPIs, we measure a few different things. So, and it's not just about electricity, by the way. One of the things we're also going after is water. So it's common knowledge. If anybody wants to look, you can go to the PepsiCo website and type in PepsiCo. The plus sign is in positive, and there's a lot of literature on there. But we are measuring our water usage. So in a snacks plant, we're aiming to get down to 0.6 litres per kilogram of product produced. And then in our beverages facilities, 1.2 litres of water every 1 litre we produce. So if you look at those quickly, the 0.6 sounds like a challenge, but we don't make water. So actually the beverages one is a more significant challenge because we have 0.2 worth of litre to wash the lines, clean the lines, everything you do in a normal facility. So, you asked about the KPIs. We have them on a monthly period and we're tracking those. We also use our energy usage per litre or kilogram that we're using, electricity and gas. And then we also have our targets on greenhouse gases. So what are our emissions? And then what are our annual targets in order to lower those? So GHG is another big metric that we follow.
Yeah, water is a big one. It comes up a lot of conversations that we're having. Can you unpack some of the examples of ways that you're saving water and what the impact's been across the group?
So water is saved in a multitude of ways. You've got to think like a water. Our utilities company is a simple way. You need to find a way of how do you clean water and keep reusing it. So there's some of that technology we're using now in certain parts of the lines. This is proper, legitimately signed off water here. So it's not just some Heath Robinson thing. It's a proper technical signed off piece. So that's very simple things. So when we design factories now, we try and look at how we capture rainwater, just for very simple things. So I know in our Skelmersdale factory in the UK, for example, all the roof water flushes the toilets. So it's down from very simple designs like that. So all the other way, which is wastewater treatment plants, where we are, like a small utilities company, fully getting grey water, and how do we bring that back into our water that's acceptable to use? Now, at the moment, most of that water is used for things like flushing toilets, but the aspiration, you want to hit these targets, you have to get this all the way to fully legitimate drinking water standard with all the relevant regulations and sign-offs. That needs to be the kind of technology you need to be doing, and that's not cheap. But water is the commodity, for all of us. Okay, in the UK, but we have an assessment, and all of our facilities in Turkey are classed as high water risk. It's southern Turkey is very hot, and the water is a premium. So therefore, we have to find ways. So sometimes you always look for a payback and a return. With water, it's just doing the right thing.
You mentioned there, it sounds like a very broad project, from the way that you design factories from the ground up through to how you're capturing the water to how you're using it. Can you walk us through who's involved, what stakeholders are involved in those types of projects? We often talk about systems thinking in sustainability, but then when you interrogate the projects, it's done by a team or a person leading a team. It's not necessarily group wide. Can you unpack who's involved in those conversations?
There's a multitude of people. Yeah, I say this is from the top down. So from our CEO, Roman Laguarta, and we have an executive vice president, Jim Andrews, whose role is sustainability, all the way down the organization. So the general manager of each country and the leaders of the supply chain across the world and for Europe, right down to then the engineers and the technicians that work in the factories. Everybody's got a part to play. So, from a stakeholder bit, as I said, we've got corporate strategy and targets to go and deliver. That filters down all the way through the organization. But it's also what's really good is people want to do this. It's the right thing to do. People all of us like green energy. And the generational thing as well, I come back to now, our consumers and our customers expect us to do this. We're a big company. I don't know, again, from an agricultural point of view, we're trying to regenerate the land we use, for example. But, do you know that PepsiCo, we've estimated we use 7 million acres of land for our raw materials. It's huge. So therefore, we know we've got a part to play, and that's what we do. So the stakeholders, as I sort of give you the brief overviews, top down. But everybody plays a part. So if you're just an operator in one of the factories, we've got people there coming up with great ideas, initiatives, modifications to lines to save energy, as I've already talked, hit these targets. And then there's I say top down, but also bottom up. and the younger people come in, the graduates, the students that are joining our organization, they're expecting it. It's like my children, they will expect this when they become adults. There's absolutely no debate, especially for my son, that this is the right thing to do.
Yeah, and I think something that comes up in a lot of conversations I'm having as well is the need to make it real. And you said there that everyone is engaged and everyone wants to do it because it's the right thing to do. Have you got any examples of how you can make someone on the shop floor's impact visible in terms of what that will cascade into? Because sometimes it feels like you're so far removed from the wide sustainability challenge. Any examples of that?
I think, we have many ideas. And one thing Pepsi is very good at is sharing best practice. So first and foremost, if you try out an initiative, there's plenty of awards that you can be nominated for. We do have sustainability awards. But the other aspect is, if it works and it lands, there is a sort of formal governance that we go through which shares these kind of projects. Because the aim will be, if it goes a quick win, that would replicate that across the whole of Europe or Asia or into the US states. So there's a certain procedure in order to do that kind of thing, and we've had, I just go back from some of my time with some of the interactions. People have found new motors, more efficient motors, and they might actually cost a little bit more, but then they've worked out that the efficiency and the energy saving has an amazing payback, and they submit that as an idea. It goes through, and then we'll do a policy change, and we'll say, for this technology going forward, this is the kind of equipment which is now the standard and generate. I think, like I said, we'll put people into nominations for awards and recognition, and vitally make sure people get the credit for the great ideas that are coming up.
You mentioned there about new motors and improving some of the efficiency of the plant equipment there. And in the briefing for this podcast, we spoke about how you're using gravity as well. Do you want to just unpack some of the projects around how you're using those tools to generate return?
Yeah, I think gravity is very much a passion of mine, and there'll be a lot of people here that are working in not just food, but in many different types of factories and facilities. How many times you see a motor powering something up on a conveyor and then it to roll back down later on? And it's a historical thing. You start off with factory as it is, and then 5 years down the line, you put another manufacturing line and you change the modification, and you end up with conveyors going up and down like a roller coaster. We've got to get away from that. Whereas actually, if you start a design high up and then bring it down as it comes towards the end, you can remove. I talk about efficient motors. Well, the best thing to do is not have a motor in the first place. So how do you build your designs in a way that leverages something which is free and gravity is free? So how can we use that more and more? How can we get things to slide, move them down? I'd really question the design. We quite often get a schematic drawing from a supplier. This is not just PepsiCo, this is any company. How do we really look at it? We normally look at the technology, cost and efficiency. More and more now we need to be scrutinized. What's a kilowatt per hour? What's the consumption of the old line and the new line? We're really going after these metrics. Come back to my earlier comment. Yes, we've got to find green technology, but the best thing to do in the first place is don't use the power. And that's my first challenge of why do we need it? And if we need it, what is the best possible way of designing it so that it's the absolute bare minimal that we need to use?
Brilliant. So we've spoken there about the things that you can do with the tools and the technologies that are available, and indeed employing gravity to help you along the way. For those areas that you can't electrify, you using some novel technology around biomethane. Do you want to give us a bit of an insight into that?
Yeah, sure. So we've just done an amazing project. Bit of a structure. We have like a central engineering team in Europe. Also, we have engineers local to my organization within Turkey. And they partnered together to go after a biomethane plant. So a lot of companies these days are using anaerobic digesters. Typically what you do is you produce a gas, you then put it into a high-speed turbine and you generate electricity from that. That's great when you want to electrify, because you go down a sustainability journey, or typically you want to electrify everything because it's the easiest way, to then be able to find solar, wind, or whatever technologies to do it. However, not always, the OEMs of the equipment, we don't always have a way to not remove gas. And so at the moment, we still have a predicament of something that's using gas like a fryer. How do we turn that into a green technology? And what we've done in our Manisa facility in Turkey is produced globally, we believe, going to be in PepsiCo, the first ever biomethane plant. So what we use there is we use the waste from our facilities. I put that into the biomethane plant, and I'd sign off there now to pump in 1/3 of our gas. I wish it was more, and that'll be the next challenge of how do we get that 1/3 to be 100%. But we've reduced our natural gas usage by 30%, and around 2,500 tons of greenhouse gases reduced as well. So again, that's another technology we've used there around again, and that was working along with policymakers. You talked about the stakeholders. We're very much also interested in partnering universities, working with local governments, and opening up to any ideas. They've got to be safe and food safe. That's the first caveat of a big company. But we must try. I'm a firm believer. If you don't fail, you've not tried hard enough. So and unfortunately, this one passed first time. But again, this is a breakthrough technology. Now, our utopia is we don't want to use any gas. But at the moment, why we haven't, like I said, got all the technology solves, we're now finding a way to come up with our own waste stream into an energy source and then pump that back into the factories.
Truly circular. That's brilliant. And how are the successes that you're seeing here in Turkey bleeding into other sites and other facilities that you manage?
Yeah, it's good. First of all, you talk about culture. We've got a great one of sharing, but also there's a bit of competitiveness between the factories, which is brilliant to see. They want to be the first to get off the grid. They want to be the first to electrify vehicles. So there's many methods to do, but we work as one team. Like I said, I've never heard anybody yet say, I'm not happy that you're turning the technology or the production of energy into green technology. It's everybody knows it's the right thing to do. So there's a real big partnership between the factories, but along with a bit of a competitive spirit of who can get it first or who can get the new technology. That's directionally how we operate.
Fantastic. So moving on to some of the skills that you've acquired in your time in industry, I suppose people are very familiar with Lean and Six Sigma and things like that. You're well versed in those methodologies. How have you used those tools to help identify processes that are ripe for improvement?
So break them down into two pieces. So first of all, Lean. I'll come back to the design. Making sure the designs are lean. I always use the phrase value add. If you've got a bit of equipment adding no value, why is it there? And I can guarantee everybody probably listen to this. If you walk down the line, you'll find some bit of the equipment that's not needed. So first of all, I try and put the emphasis of the lean into the design. So therefore, that's the ultimate way. From a Six Sigma, we have a large array. We've got an amazing Six Sigma program from green belts, black belts, and master black belts within our organization. And we have some phenomenal and clever, far cleverer than myself, people doing proper, data-led analytics and analysis of why to solve. So all the way things to things like corrugate strength. How much do you over-engineer corrugate? Right down to the efficiencies. So again, I know from my previous role in PepsiCo, in Cooper, our Quaker Oats facility in Scotland, we've been working on the efficiency of some of the mechanical and electrical generation of equipment, which has been proven that we were basically using too much energy, too much aspects into it. Statistically, we've proven it through black belt Six Sigma work to statistically justify that we can reduce things. And then obviously that's gone through the standard process that we have and the rigor to make sure it's checked, verified, signed off. So for me, it's a huge part of the jigsaw. There is no silver bullet, on the sustainable journey. It takes a multitude of things, but by sure, we are really leveraging. You asked, what's my role? I've made it very clear 4 principles this year, one of which is about the sustainable journey, and I'm directing the teams onto that as a no debate. We have to go after it, and we have to go after it aggressively. And I call it LSS, Lean and Six Sigma teams. play a significant part in that day in, day out. And again, whether that's walking down the line with relevant checks to our black belts, our master black belts that are working on projects for 6, 9, 12, 18 months, conquering some really complex technologies to get us to a better place.
Lean is all about engagement, as you know, and you've spoken in the podcast already about the fact that change within PepsiCo is bottom up and top down. Something that I'm quite interested in is the, not friction, but the relationship between people like you, leaders within the organization, and sort of CEOs and FDs who have a responsibility for market share and shareholder value and so on. How do you manage some of those tensions between on costs around net zero innovation and sort of business as usual?
Well, I think, as I said, first of all, it's CEO led the PepsiCo journey. So I think, first of all, strategically, we've got it in the right place. But you're absolutely right. There's a time and a place to implement. And I think it's just working together. When is the right time to do Project X? And I think, the solar being a great example, it didn't pay back 3, 4, 5 years ago. But as energy costs went through the roof, all of a sudden big business cases came, and, I'm not hiding anything which is not the obvious. You put a load of solar panels down at the moment, they will save you a lot more electrical costs than they would have done even 2 years ago. And that's around the world. So, I think it's just having an agreement. So you have a target of X, and then you got to hit that certain threshold in order to be able to go and deliver it. And I think that's the piece. The other part is being smart. So as everything in every business is depreciated. When does that depreciation come down, and when is the right time to do it? You can't do everything at once. You're right. We've got a responsibility to our shareholders. We've got a responsibility to our customers and our consumers. You just got to do it in a sensible way. So I think, my own personal view, it's just my own view, is just working together as a cross-functional team. You'll find out when, is the right thing to do. And you're pragmatic. You prioritize, and the sort of quick wins and the bigger returns, they come first. And that as you get towards, say, that 2030 goal or the 2040, some things you just got to do, like water. Very hard to get a return on water, but it's absolutely the right thing you need to do. And that kind of thing, we just invest. For the energy reducing ones, you pick the biggest ones that are going to give you the maximum output and best return for your bang for the buck.
And building on that concept of buy-in, you spoke there about the internal buy-in. What about buy-in with your suppliers? How does it work in terms of getting them to come on that journey with you? Because I'm presuming there are some differences or disruption in terms of the way you're working when you're standing these things up. So how does that manifest itself?
Yeah, I think, as I said, we've got a massive supplier base at PepsiCo. We've only talk about the larger players. Every organization pretty much that I know now is on a sustainability path. Everybody's going green. So I think working together, finding out where you can collaborate, and that's not just around sustainable. I think information share as well. Where can you share information which will benefit both parties? Not in a illegal manner, by the way, but I mean just, certain things that you can share best practices. I used to know the supply chain lead of Innocent. You probably know that. They're owned by Coca-Cola. They've been building a factory in Holland, which is off the grid. And, they've been very open of they're not going to compete on the sustainability journey. So on that kind of place, the more we can share this, the more we get scale, the more the cost comes down, and the better it is for the world, our children, the planet. So there's a bit of, just applying a little bit of common sense is my view on that one. And sharing things where there's no potential sensitivities around showing that.
Brilliant. Well, delighted to say that the Innocent case study is on the Sustainable Industry Research site as well. Chris Field and the chap I think you mentioned there is another great example of innovation in action. It's wonderful. So I'm conscious of time. In terms of sort of to close this off now, what advice would you give to other leaders that are focused on net zero, potentially starting projects at the moment and trying to get buy-in internally? What advice would you give him or her to help them push through?
I think the first point is realize that you can't do it all at once. I think you need to lay out what do you want to be? What is your end game? You got to have a strategy. You got to have a plan. And as we sort of alluded to, there were the CEO, CFO type of conversations. Work out a pragmatic process of how you're going to go and do this. I think that was the first step. I think the second part we would partner with some really good people. I've spoken to many universities over my years working with PepsiCo. A lot of students still working on theoretical problems. They are desperate for real problems. Go and partner with some universities and get some people to learn. At the same time, being honest, you get some benefit from hopefully some great ideas coming into your organization as well. So look holistically, be smart about it, but don't put it off. As I remember 2021 to 2030, in your mind's like, it's years away. Time comes around fast, so it's the right thing to do. And I'd also think about, think about your next generation of customers and consumers. I don't know, but my firm belief is, for the people who are our children now, when they become adults, they will be expecting this. So, my phrase that I use a lot is not what's the cost to do this, what's the cost of not doing it? And that's probably the way I'd close it up. What is the cost for society and the world of not doing this kind of stuff? If we're the ones producing greenhouse gases, we've got to be the ones to take the responsibility to find new solutions and new technologies to remove those harmful gases.
Perfect way to close off. Ian, thank you so much for your time and your candor. It's been fantastic talking to you. Look forward to hearing more about the project as time goes on. Thank you so much.
Cheers, mate. Nice to talk to you.
Thank you.